Hello and welcome to the training log for the week of February 13th. This is week 7 of rip and tear at my bulk, so we're approaching the 2/3 point. This week I took most of my sets a little bit easier as the fatigue caught up with me, but I still got some good AMRAPs in and plenty of odd lifts, so I could tell pretty early in this week just from the working sets that I needed to take it a little bit easier. The squat reps that were easy last week were not nearly as easy this week. Same with bench. So I just decided I was going to complete the prescribed reps and then take the AMRAPs much easier than I normally would. Rip and Tear's progression scheme has an increase in sets, an increase in weight, but a decrease in rep over the course of each 1 month period, and then also over the course of the whole 3-month program. So nearing the end of the second 1 month period, I'm down to working on just singles from our working sets. This is 535 pounds, which is not much more than I was doing last week, but these singles felt just as hard, if not harder, than I believe the triples I was doing last week. So that was a good sign that the fatigue had caught up. So when I got to the AMRAP, I decided I wasn't going to blast it. I wasn't going to try for a PR. I was going to go until I felt one of the reps being grindy, and then I was just going to call it. And that was just a way to kind of conserve some energy for the next week and just to try and reduce the fatigue I've been gathering up. You can't go completely balls to the wall every week, or at least it's not usually going to work very well. So you can see that rep slowed down. I got really kind of hip hingy, and I decided I was just going to call it there. Bench went about the same. Obviously, the working sets felt a little bit better, as anyone who's done a lot of upper body versus lower body work knows. Upper body work tends to feel easier until you just kind of hit the point where you can't actually press anymore, versus lower body where there's a pretty big gap between when it starts to really feel hard and when you actually fail. So these singles at 365 moved pretty well. I was pretty happy with them. And when I got to the AMRAP, I managed 365 for 3, which is not a PR, but it's only 1 rep shy of my best PR at 365. So not a bad set, all things considered. I wasn't expecting to PR anything here, so I thought I might have ended up with only 2, but 3 is something I'll take. Despite the fatigue that I was feeling on my compound focus days, I felt like I got pretty good hypertrophy focus days this week, so I ended up doing my upper body day at home due to some work timing. So it's a little bit different than what I would do at the gym, so I thought I'd include some of the videos here. I've been starting my upper body hypertrophy days with a heavy shoulder focus press versus a heavy chest focus press, partially because I'm already doing a lot of horizontal pressing with all the bench work I'm doing, and partially because I really want to try and strengthen up my shoulders now so I have a better base to work with when I finally get back outside and start training overhead press. Getting a stronger overhead press is a fairly big priority for this next season of training. Partially because it's a weak point, and partially because I don't want to zero press at my next strongman show like I did at the last one. So I feel like getting my shoulders stronger and then the triceps stronger in that plane of motion will help carry over once I get a chance to train that specific movement more carefully. These are 90-pound dumbbells, and the bench is at about 75%, which isn't straight up and down, but I feel like that's the angle that I'm probably going to be in when I'm leaning back for an overhead press, so I think I'll have better carryover than sitting the bench at, say, 90 degrees straight up. I alternated my shoulder press with lat pull downs using the V-bar. I'm a big fan of the V-bar both for lat pull downs, horizontal rows, really any kind of pulling motion you can think of is really good with the V-bar in my opinion. I know it catches a lot of flack, but the people saying that are either small themselves or making content pretty much exclusively for small people. So I think that says a lot about whether it is actually good or not. If the only people saying, hey, don't use the V-bar aren't really big, then maybe you shouldn't listen to them. But you can, of course, use whichever attachments you like. As far as I'm concerned, back is one of the simplest muscle groups to train. You just need to pull heavy things towards you. It gets massively overcomplicated by nearly everyone, and it really doesn't need to be that way. After that, I moved on to some close grip Cadillac bar pressing. I like this just because the camber in the bar lets you get a little bit deeper, so it kind of feels like it's bridging the gap between a barbell press and a dumbbell press. I couldn't go quite as deep as I wanted to here because my plates were hitting my racked plates. There's not really a good place to put all those plates. I like having them on the rack for easy accessibility, but they do get in the way sometimes, so at some point I'd like to upgrade to a 6-post rack just to have a dedicated post for hanging plates, but that's not really something I have room for right now. I alternated that pressing with these bent over dumbbell rows at, I want to say 165 or 175. So I try to strike a balance between control and good contraction, and using enough English to get significant weight up, and I feel like I struck that balance pretty well. I could lawnmower start probably more in this, and I could strict row a little bit less in this, but this is a good middle ground too. And I also took that chance to practice hook grip a little bit, which was uncomfortable, but it did the job. Finally, I worked on some lateral raises, and I've said this before, but I think this is the best way to hit lateral raises. Being on the bench like that immobilizes your back, which really stops you from bringing your traps into the movement, and laying down prevents you from using your legs to hop the weight up. So it's just really good at forcing you to isolate the proper muscles. You can, of course, isolate them with a standing lateral or dumbbell lateral or really any other kind of lateral, but this just makes it super easy to do so. Moving on to some of the more fun lifts, this is, I think, part of the reason I was so fatigued this week. Last weekend, I spent a lot of time messing around with this lift, which is the log bazooka clean, I guess you could call it. There was a challenge from the World's Strongest Opinion podcast crew to perform this lift with as much weight as possible, and I love me an informal internet challenge, so I got to it, despite the fact that this is not really a good lift to be doing inside with a ceiling that's not much taller than you are and a mirror right behind you. Despite that, I was able to get the 275 you just saw with my kind of Zercher squat form, which did not work past that. So I tried 285 multiple times with that weight, and I dumped it every time. So I got a lot of nice fail videos there. I went back on Sunday and I tried it with the kind of bear hug and twist approach. Now, I have next to no practice with shouldering. I've tried to shoulder Atlas stones once, and I've shouldered a light sandbag once. So that's the extent of my experience with this kind of movement. So I was just kind of guessing and, intuitively trying to figure out how to lift like this, and I had nothing else besides some videos of other guys trying to lift the log this way to really guesstimate what the technique should look like. But I did manage to get the 285 that I missed several times the night before, and that's about where it ended. I took a lot of tries at higher weights, and I failed all of them. This was the closest I got, and I think I might have managed it. I want to say this was 295 or 300. But I hit my ceiling, which I should have expected considering it's about 6 inches taller than I am. And after that, I decided, you know what, I should probably stop trying to destroy my basement. Plus, some guy had hit like 340 pounds, and I knew I wasn't going to do that, regardless of my clearance, so that was a good stopping point. Now, normally I'm able to bang out so many of these weird lifts and not get a ton of fatigue from it because I will just do a series of singles until I hit one single that feels pretty hard, and I just stop there because I'm not trying to really completely max these lifts. I'm just trying to hit a good heavy single. But this was specifically a competition where I was trying to beat the other competitors, so I did a lot more attempts than I normally would on an odd lift, and I had a lot more failed reps at very high weights. So obviously I didn't win, but I did justify the fact that I kept so many of the extra ceiling tiles after I put the ceiling in. This week I also tried to max out the Camber bar neck clean, which is a movement I inadvertently discovered last week when I had to re-rack this bar multiple times between my attempts at the upside down camber bench press and the camber Denny ring ox ring lift. I expected to get somewhere between 400 and 500, and that's about where I landed. This is my second to last warm-up, and I want to say 405, and it's not that difficult of a movement. The weight isn't really so much on your head and neck because you are grabbing the arms and using a significant amount of your lats to pull in the arms and shift the weight backwards a little bit, but it's still quite a bit of a demand on your flexibility and your lumbar / posterior train strength. So this is the top rep at 435. And for all the glass backs out there, I do want to point out one thing. Very carefully watch my lower back, specifically not the mid back, but the lower back through all this. And you'll notice that while my mid back and upper back are definitely curved, the lower back is basically perfectly straight, which is how most of these heavy deficit lifts are. It's not bending my lower back, so even though I could bend my lower back with a pretty high weight because that area is pretty strong and I do not have a brace, I don't need to because I can put all that bending in my mid and upper back, which is much more conducive to being bent and staying strong. Last but not least, I added yet another deadlift variation to the long list of deadlift variations that I can perform with greater than or equal to 800 pounds. So this is my first 800 plus pound sumo barbell deadlift. And because sumo is hard and I don't know how to actually do it, I turned it into a conventional deadlift by bringing my stance in and then just bringing my arms even farther in. So that is my heels touching and my hands touching, so this is quite possibly the most narrow sumo deadlift possible. but I was still able to lift over 800 pounds more on that when I could not do it with the more traditional wide stance because I'm built for conventional and I'm not built for sumo, and sumo is actually hard and not cheating. So I think that if I use a slightly wider stance and maybe a little bit wider grip, I can get this past 9 plate, which would be really cool. That about wraps up this week. I know that I want to attempt a 1 rep max for squat next week for the dealer's choice AMRAP at the end of the month. Not sure what I'm going to do with bench, but it's probably not getting impressive, but who knows, maybe I'll surprise myself. As always, if you want to see something specific in these videos, let me know, and if there's anything you can do to improve them, let me know. Other than that, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next week.